So I own a onesie now. Let's talk about something that's been going on, something you've probably seen, something you've probably heard, but you're not really sure what it is. Let's talk about the blue line. You've seen it on vehicles, you've seen it on stickers, you've seen it all over the place. But what it really stands for and what is being represented as today are two completely different things. So let's talk about the history, let's talk about the manipulation, let's talk about the facts. Let's talk about the thin blue line.
My name is Callion, and I'm not 23. I'm still a bum and love potatoes to the highest degree. I'm 24 now, and I don't have a job. I just hope I'll get big baller once this mixtape will drop. I am the father. I'm just kidding.
The thin blue line was developed in 1965 and was better reestablished in 1988. To even illustrate how far back the thin blue line goes, it ranks back all the way down to 1954 when the police unions started to really come about. In fact, many believe that the thin blue line was originally the reason why unions were built, to help give officers a standardized voice and give a mutual understanding to the bigwigs so they better understood some of the technical, physical, and mental difficulties they have while doing their job. These unions between these officers started off with goodwill. Back in the day, some officers would make mistakes and lose everything: pension, job, reputation, integrity, things that nowadays seem almost impossible to take away from officers. Even though they didn't commit such heinous crimes back then, they were still excused. But as time went on and money became more of a factor, it became very clear that the thin blue line started to turn into an organized gang within the police department, as countless stories about blackmail, extortion, corruption, and internal investigations going unsolved for decades for officers who refused to give testimony, who lied in police reports, and even fabricated evidence in order to get convictions. As time went on, police departments changed. They became more of a quota system, forcing officers to meet unreasonable expectations in their day-to-day activities, and also forced them to be more interactive with the community, but from a law standpoint and not from a community standpoint. The Thin Blue Line was based on a documentary that really spoke and illustrated some of the traumatic and more frightful parts of being an officer. For example, in 1960s and the 1950s, officers were also firefighters. So to be an officer back in the day was an all-purpose job. The documentary also helped illustrate in 1988 some of the more physical, mental, social, and spiritual depressions that officers come into contact with, and how the job could be overwhelmingly stressful for them. Rightfully so, they had to deal and make life and death decisions on a day-to-day basis. Although the documentary in 1988 didn't really speak to the magnitude of how officers handle their day-to-day activities, more of the traumatic situations, such as being shot, handling the emotions of the community, handling the physical and mental emotional pressures that come from being an officer. It never really expanded or broadened in the idea that it would have today. So what does the Thin Blue Line represent to police officers now? With this constant build of tension and pressure, it became inevitable that people within the Thin Blue Line felt that the stress that they were feeling once by working their job was now being forced and put against them by their superior officers. This tension then bled out into their work, which then bled out into the community. Wasn't the cause of the cycle, just didn't stop it. And from their lackadaisical approach, inevitably led to the dramatic situation we are in today. The Thin Blue Line in today's culture has a negative connotation depending on what group you represent or you feel you're being represented by. And most people who represent the Thin Blue Line know nothing about the 1965 documentary, talk less of the 1988 movement for psychological evaluations of officers who were involved in shootings. Many people began to see the exploit of these issues, and within their departments, the only way they could protect themselves is by hindering others from realizing it themselves. It is our job as community leaders to guide ourselves into a community-based policing situation so that the demographics of people who defend the Thin Blue Line don't all look like this, and the people who seem to constantly have issues with police don't all look like this. It is our job as human beings to come together and police the police. So let's talk about perspectives. The Black Lives Matter perspective from certain people who don't really understand or choose not to believe that they come in peace or are actually trying to state an eloquent issue they have in their community might believe that the Black Lives Matter movement has done no good for our community, but in counter counter, they have done great things and helped progress and make question of police training, brutality, and all-out use of force in our community a relevant topic that will continue to go on and lead to much needed change within our justice system. Seeing as how now it is justifiably possible for you to kill a black person who is running from you. But what is my beef with the Blue Lives Matter? Now is being used almost to give a negative connotation to anyone who doesn't support police department, even though there's an unbearable amount of corruption that goes into many of our police departments and no one is being held accountable. The thin blue line used to be a way for officers to kind of come together and put these differences and issues out in the light, but now we have officers who are going up against the thin blue line and are losing. They are telling, they are snitching, they are reporting, they are doing their jobs, they are being good officers, but yet thin blue line doesn't hold solidarity with these officers, which then lies my big problem. Black Lives Matter have no problem supporting all lives matter. In fact, when he died, even though he's not black, we marched and protested in his name. But here it is, this officer was fired for putting out bad officers within his department. He was fired and the thin blue line was nowhere to be found, which makes you believe if they're not there protesting and actively acting against the injustice that are happening to officers, what is their purpose? Is it too far-fetched to believe that thin blue line is just a negative response to the Black Lives Matter? I'll leave that up to you to judge. But if you create something in order to counteract something but claim it's not going to affect them, I think you... And even to take it a step further, even after the Dallas sniper executed 5 officers, the Black Lives Matter movement still supported the police department and showed their solidarity with the police department. The Blue Lives Matter movement, which was propagated heavily in Dallas after the Dallas sniper, there was no sign of it. You wouldn't find a blue ribbon tied up around any tree unless it was for cancer awareness. And I'm not saying that their intent is wrong. I'm not saying that their intent is bad. I'm not even saying that their intent is not justified. I'm just saying that it's a coincidence that immediately after a major protest went on in a community, they immediately found solidarity in something else other than the protest that was going on. People who refuse to support Black Lives Matter because they feel that they can't relate to the issues black people are going through in America kind of vex me, because it means that you're so closed-minded that you're not willing to empathize with anybody, which in psychological terms means you are probably a medium to high psychopath, and I advise you get clinical help. Being able to empathize with people's situations shouldn't be hard because we have so much footage and stories to back it up. It's very clear now, no matter who you are in this country, for you to not acknowledge the fact that police have been brutalizing people of color in this country for years is so dangerously ignorant of you. I question how you make it through your day-to-day activities without hurting yourself. So in short, the thin blue line, I don't have a problem with it. I do have a problem with people who support it and don't really support their police department. People who put these stickers and wear these shirts aren't people who feel solidarity with officers. These are just people who are trying to self-identify as I'm with you. I feel there's more people who support the thin blue line without a justifiable reason or any real course of action are the same people that go into a jury and blatantly say I refuse to convict an officer no matter what he has done, such as the case with Officer Michael Slager. One juror refused to convict Michael Slager and now he's walking the streets free. You see, this isn't what the thin blue line wanted. This isn't what the thin blue line was supposed to represent. The thin blue line was designed to keep people like Michael Slager off the street, believe it or not. But too many people are using and almost abusing the thin blue line, which was designed originally to help police officers come to terms with the difficult decisions and things they have to do in their job. It was a way out for them on a mental, physical level that is now being manipulated and twisted by cynical people in our community to push the agenda that it is a me versus them and we are on your side. The thin blue line is not something for you to exploit. The thin blue line isn't a bumper sticker you can put on your car in hopes that an officer that pulls you over doesn't give you a ticket. The thin blue line isn't an excuse to not support Black Lives Matter. What if I told you thin blue line and Black Lives Matter are both fighting for the same thing? See, that's the idea of having community-based activities. So you want some advice? If you're representing something and you don't really believe in it, you're a phony. If you're representing something because you don't like another thing, you're fake. And if you think representing the thin blue line makes you a good person because it actively says what you're not trying to say, you're ignorant. And if you think showing solidarity with officers who commit heinous crimes and do horrible activity within your community are good officers regardless of what they did just because it didn't happen to you, well, you're fortunate. But I pray you never have to feel. I pray you never have to feel that anguish and pain that other family members have felt because they were targeted, discriminated against, and treated differently because of the color of their skin. I pray you continue to think that that thin blue line will keep you safe from them when they decide to turn their backs on you.